Morena and good morning everyone, and welcome to the council meeting of Monday the 29th of November 2023. Welcome to the members of the public that are with us here today and staff. So just a reminder in terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, make your way to the nearest emergency exit there at the back of the hall. And the assembly point is across the road from this building, but there's a lot of roadworks there, so please if you take advice from any of the staff that are around. Everyone needs to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Just a reminder to turn your phones onto silent, please, or turn them off. And if I could ask Shad to open with a karakia for us, please.
Tēnā koe, Anne. Tēnā koe I whakahaere nei tēnei o tō tātou nei koe. Huria ki rā kia tātou katoa ko tau nei tēnei ata. I ngā manuhiri, koutou rā, ko tai ki tēnei huihunga, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia koe rā Brian, korua tahi kia koe ata. Anthony, Kylie kei muri rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Just want to acknowledge our guests this morning. To Brian, who was my Standard 4 primary school teacher, to Ata and Anthony, and also Kylie presenting this morning. But we'll just open with a short karakia. Nō reira, kia nui tātou. E te atua anei rā mātou huitahi nei, ka tuku rā ngā whakamunutinga whakawhētai ki a koe. Toro mai rā toronga kaha ki runga I a mātou, hei āwhina, hei tohu nei I a mātou reo I nei mahi. Kia whaihua rahi tika mā tātou katoa. Nō reira, tēnei mātūne, tēnei kia koe, korori ki tōnga tapu. Amen.
Thanks, Shad. There's no apologies, everyone's here. That brings us to the public forum, and we have Brian Day starting off this morning. Morning, Brian. Welcome again. It's been a long journey. I hope we're going to sort it today for you. Yep. Just make sure it's on green. That's it. And you've got 5 minutes.
From when I started, you mentioned that this was the 29th of November. I might have missed a couple of days there. I hope I'm at the right meeting. Kia ora koutou, good morning everyone. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, greetings to you all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Te hei mawari ora, let there be life. My name is Brian Day. Is that coming through clearly? I live just around the corner from the Gulf Road Reserve. Omanu is my hood. I assume you are all aware that for 2 years we have been promoting the use of a portion of the Gulf Road Reserve for community gardens. That's for 2 years. There have been sticking points and stages which have severely undermined progress, and we're extremely disappointed with the unnecessary delays. I have prepared a very detailed statement for this forum. I was fully prepared to present a very explicit argument supporting our stance. There was a conversation around Omanu Gardens using the space created by demolishing the buildings contaminated by asbestos. We find that attitude to our endeavours contemptible. There was the suggestion we could use the gully in the golf course between the building and the 3 huge phoenix palms. That idea is entirely unsatisfactory. We need a flat area. We can't operate on hillsides. Those palms would be a constant threat to us. Is this mic working properly? Sounding strange here. Once again, we are being offered an unsuitable hodgepodge. We're not interested in using that space. However, let's go past that. Let's cut to the chase. On Wednesday, 22nd November last week, we received a copy of the report Ross Hudson has prepared for this meeting. Included in that is a proposed Are you sure that's working properly? Okay. Included in that report is a proposed allocation of space, which is a suitable practical option able to satisfy our needs. We need a license to occupy space on the sunny northeast side of the reserve, able to be reticulated for water for the least cost, not in danger from the firing line of shanked shots from golf, a compact flat area sufficient for 50 beds, allowing for projected expansion, able to be managed and maintained by an enthusiastic group of volunteer gardeners. Now, because you have already decided golf can lease the middle of Bowls Green 2, we can now identify the space between the new play centre and the piece of public land you are giving to golf. We would use a portion of that land that is marked area 2443.79 square metres and apparently allocated for community gardens. Please, would you get cracking and issue a licence to occupy the portion described in that paragraph? We look forward to hearing from whomever it concerns immediately. Finally, a couple of thoughts. Regarding the suggested new tee in the reserve, have you commissioners walked the talk? Have you been out there? Chad, have you been out there? Have you walked?
The public forum is where you speak to us. It's not a conversation. You just make your presentation.
Sure. I wonder if you'd nod as I mention your name. That's
No,
not
no,
a conversation.
No, I just carry on with your presentation.
Well, I assume that those people haven't been out there. You have, Anne. That's good. Do you realise how close to the houses the new tee will be? Commissioners, it's 20 metres from the Ocean Beach Road houses. That's the proposed move from the current siting. The current siting is very close to the one put in by Philip Tauranga. But the new one is almost 100 metres further closer to the Ocean Beach Road houses. Now, really, we've gone past that. I've walked that area thoroughly. I know exactly where the things are. I'm just asking, is that wise? What your peers that you are supporting, is that wise? Nō reira, nā hau e whā, rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. After this very lengthy saga, it's been 2 years now, wherever you're from, whatever your status, chiefly or otherwise, kia ora koutou, be well. Kia te muti aho, that's it from me. Kia pai o wā, have a good day. Kia pai o mahi, keep up the good work. Brian Day, on behalf of the Omano Community Gardens Committee. I have here the design from Philip Tauranga, which clearly shows the sensible place to have the tee. He's the professional. That's what he told the golf club. Have they told that? Have they shown that? Did they vote on that? Yes. Did they vote on the tee being inside the reserve? No. The public have never been told that. The golf club members have never voted on that. I have here a picture of this. I've mentioned before about we're very disappointed. This is the kind of picture that we've been receiving from City Council. 100 beds. Did we ask for 100 beds? No. You know, there's a bit of wisdom needs to come in here, folks, and we're looking forward to seeing you produce it for us. I've got a copy of the reading that I just made for you, should you wish to take it home and read it before you go to bed tonight. Thank you very much.
Brian, thank you very much. Well, I can assure you we're going to make a decision today, and we look forward to seeing the community garden grow, and probably want to thank the committee for their patience as we worked our way through this over the last couple of years.
One each.
Okay, so we're tabling that. Now, the next in the public forum, we have Mr. Te Atarangi Whiu and Anthony Ruanui coming up for us. Welcome. So I understand you've got a presentation for us. A couple of slides. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Morena tātai. I mihi ana nā rangatira mā o Kaunahira, ka nui te mihi ki a tātai. I mihi ana i te tuakana shared mō te karakia tuwhira i tēnei ata, tēnā koe. Morena tātai. Katua ki au ki te maunga karakia o maunga rangi, ka rere iho, te waituku roimata o rā kei, kauru au ki te wāku, ki puwhenua, ki o tāne wānuku, ki poike, ki te tuatara wānanga rere mai rā te awa o Waimapu. Ko honu atu rā i te ea o Kaitimako, o Waitao, i te tahuna o nā pāpaka o Rangataua, nā rono ake te tangata, Waihomā, nā pāpaka te manuhiri mihi. Ka hoki au ki te mauri o ki waka, ko mā tātua, ko tā ki timu, ko nai te rangi, ko nā te rangi. Te noho nā te ture, o ku hapu, ko Ngāti he, ko nai te ahi. Tū mai koutou, ko Wairakiwa, ko Te Ao Takawhāki, ko Ranginui, ko Urutumo. Ko Anthony Tākiri Rinui ahau. Morning everyone. My name's Anthony Nui. I'm here with my whanaunga, Te Atarangi, and we thank you for this opportunity. But we are here in terms of Te Pāhau. And I know you've got a paper in front of you, and just really wanting to reaffirm our inherent rights and the connection to Te Pāhau. The ownership of Te Pāhau by others, including council, has had a negative effect on Ngaitahi and Ngāti. There has been a loss of connection, a loss of traditional practices, and it also has had a negative impact, in our view, on town planning infrastructure, on the natural, ecological and biodiversity of Te Pāhau. We've also had limited access to our urupa due to the works of road planning, which is smack in the middle, as you are familiar with. And also we've been adversely affected, obviously, with public works in the past. So, very happy to be here to put this forward and put this tono and this request. But really wanting to put across to this table I guess some of the inherent issues that we've had, and wanting to make that heard in this forum. So kia ora tātou.
Hoi no, can you hear me clearly? Ka pai. Hoi no tēnā tātou katoa, tuatahi ake me mihi kātika kia koe te kauhautu o tēnei waka, taino atu ki o hoa o pia o Amorangi hoki, rātou ko Shad, Bill, Stephen hoki, taino atu kia koutou ki tēnei taha o hāpai o me ki, koutou o te kaunihera, no māua ki te whiwhi, no māua ki te maringa nui. Te Atarangi whiu, Ngaitiahi, I'm just going to go as far as that in terms of that's my primary affiliation for today's kaupapa. Not only are we, both Anthony and I, supported by yourselves, purely by allowing us to present today, but also by the team that are behind us, so we feel very comfortable to come into this space today. Following on from my whanaunga's kōrero about reaffirming our inherent rights to Te Pāhau Reserve, and his kōrero around the impact of the loss of that connection, the loss of that kaitiakitanga, but we have to always look, we now have to move forward and look at what that means for us moving forward as Ngaitiahi Ngāti He. Can you move to the next slide, please? So we, Ngaitiahi Ngāti He, jointly, collectively, wholeheartedly support the recommendation before you all around the strategic disposal of Te Pāhau Reserve to Ngaitiahi Ngāti He. We also support the proposal and the rationale for that as a key strategic cultural outcome. So these sets out our aspirations for Te Pāhau in the short term, medium term, and will be free and frank in terms of the generations that have yet to be born. We feel that in terms of the aspirations for Te Pāhau, it enables us to retain our cultural heritage because we've already affirmed our strong cultural and ancestral connection to Te Pāhau Reserve and Te Pāhau Urupa. We also see the return of Te Pāhau to both Ngaitiahi and Ngāti as an opportunity to enhance our cultural environment so that we can revive our cultural practices within that whenua and its immediate environments. So we see the ecological and biodiverse value in its return to us as kaitiaki of that whenua. In terms of the historical significance, the return of Te Pāhau back to Ngaitiahi and Ngāti will enable us to maintain our cultural histories and our cultural knowledge by allowing us to physically visit the site and remember those before us, but more importantly, aspire to what we can do in and on that whenua. We see the return of Te Pāhau back to Ngaitiahi and Ngāti as an opportunity to reaffirm our tūranga waiwai on that whenua so that we can preserve our cultural traditions. As you are well aware, that site itself has cultural heritage and spiritual significance for us. So we see this as an opportunity as well to strengthen our cultural identity. And by strengthening our cultural identity, it's an opportunity for us to protect that as a cultural site of significance for both Ngaitiahi and Ngāti. So in terms of the 3.5 minutes left, I'm going to be brief. So for us, the return of Te Pāhau Reserve to Ngaitiahi and Ngāti I've outlined what our aspirations are for the whenua, but more importantly, in terms of the return of this whenua to us, the inherent and rightful kaitiaki of this whenua means that our uri are thriving, we're strong in our identity as both Ngaitiahi and Ngāti that our whenua is flourishing, so it's accessible to our whānau, where our cultural knowledge is reinvigorated, is retained, and more importantly, is instilled in us in our everyday practice, and that knowledge is transferred through our generations, and the generations that I'm talking about are the generations that are not yet born, where our cultural practices are revitalised. When you look at those elements and those values, those mātā pono collectively, what that means for us as Ngaitiahi and Ngāti is that we are confident, we're successful, and we're a prosperous hapu within our Ngaitiahi and Ngāti whenua, but also that we are confident, successful, and prosperous citizens within the domain of Tauranga Moana. Nā reira, koina tā mātou, tā māua kōrero kia koutou, ko whārakihia ki mui a koutou, e hara nā māua nake e whakakanohi mai I tēnei kaupapa, hoi anō ko te hapu o Ngaitiahi, ko te hapu o Ngāti kei konei. Nā rātou anō I whakakōpau me ki, māua hei kanohi, hei māngai, mō ngā hapu o Ngaitiahi, Ngāti, nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā.
Very much. Any questions on this? No? I think you've covered it extremely well, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then we have Kylie Willison from Nai Tamarawaho, who's going to talk to us, come and present to us as well. The benefit of being the third up means you've seen how everyone else does it. Just make sure the little green button's on and you have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
E tā papa nā hau I te hiwi ki moi hau, kia mārama taku titiro ki Tauranga. E ko rangi nui, e ko te rangi hauhiri, ki ranga taua ko tama pahore. Kia tūranga tira tonu au I runga Waimapu, nā kahu whaia ko tahuri wakanui. E piki ana hau I te ahu kaura, e noho ana hau I te taumata I te ri o Tamarāwaho. Tēnā rā koutou, e te puari, huri no tēnei whare, ka mihi au ki oku whanaunga, kia ngā kumama, tēnei a Māora e mihi atu nei kia koutou. Thank you for this time this morning. It was kind of a last minute decision to present today. He oi anō, thought it was important that our hapu be represented in the kaupapa that is before you today, which is around the reclassification of Puke Toromiro Pā down in the Kōpūrererua Valley. I just wanted to, I know that you're aware of the Puke Toromiro Heritage Management Plan, which is a plan that we recently co-developed with staff within TCC. And reading the report, I just noticed that it wasn't mentioned in there, so I thought I would come today and just reiterate some of the kōrero that is in this plan and just support the motion that is today, which is directly an action out of that plan, with the intent in terms of the hapu perspective to protect our pā from further damage or further roads impacting on our pā, because we've already experienced that in the past. So I guess the mechanism on the table today is just, I am not totally convinced it's the right one, but it is a tool to enable us to further fortify our pā and to stop further impact on it. I refer to our Heritage Management Plan, Section 6, which talks about management guidelines, and there it says, Ngai Tamarāwaho representatives who had input into the development of the plan expressed a clear aspiration to fulfil their role as kaitiaki for the pā and the wider valley. This is conveyed in our hapu management plan, which says the cultural landscape, traditional lands, waters, and other ancestral taonga that have been handed down to us have placed an obligation on us, the present generation, to act as kaitiaki, guardians of these things, to ensure that what we pass to the next generation is not diminished, but rather has been enhanced by our kaitiaki tenure. This plan recognises this role and highlights areas where Tauranga City Council may support and facilitate the fulfilment of the aspiration within the framework of the relevant legislation, and in doing so, give effect to treaty principles. In practical terms, this means that the conservation of heritage places must be balanced with the sustainable and beneficial use of the valley, which secures the future well-being of mana whenua. The pā exists within a dynamic landscape, and if you've been to Kōpūrererua, you would know that, and that has been subject to both natural and human-induced processes of change, and these will continue. One of the key objectives of the plan is the successful management of change so that the physical values of the pā are conserved. This means managing natural processes and ensuring no further lasting damage from human activities, the inclusion of Ngai Tamarāwaho in high-level management decision-making, as well as the active management of the pā, alongside recognition of the significance of the pā, will contribute to the ongoing protection of cultural heritage values. It is not just cultural heritage values, it is our spiritual, our physical, also tied up in there. So one of the actions from that is to implement a co-management model for the governance and administration of Puke Toromiro Pā when it becomes a historic reserve. So I support this process to enable that next step to happen. But looking at the bigger picture, Puke Toromiro Pā is just one site within a huge 300 plus hectare valley. Above it, we have pā sites on both sides of the ridge. We all know of Puke Hinahina, Gate Pā, huge significant battle. The valley was following the battle, was where my tupuna walked and escaped. But also on the pā itself, my tupuna lived there, and we have a strong desire to reconnect to those places such as Puke Toromiro and the Kōpurerere Valley and be active on the ground. So I'm here to support that kaupapa, but lastly, just keeping in mind our perspective that nothing exists on this planet to live in isolation. So if we just look at one part of the valley, we would be not doing our role properly as kaitiaki. So my message today is, I guess, is to look at the bigger picture, not just the pā, and is to encourage staff in the council to sit down with us and have that meaningful conversation right at the beginning after this goes through the process of historic reserve, and we actually implement that, something that really looks like co-governance and management, because we need to work together on this and recognise the hapu's aspirations, which will complement the mahi that the council does down there. So koira taku kororoi te rānei, and just the signal that we will be putting a submission to the LTP around mahi that we want to carry out within the valley. Koira. Kia ora koutou.
Very much. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. So that then brings us back to the agenda. We have no late items. There is no confidential business to be transferred into the open. Not aware of any change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 6th of November. Any moved by Bill and seconded by Shad. The only thing I had to raise was when we talked about and when Miss Ashley G was addressing us and I gave her that long list, I thought that I had referenced in the Dive Crescent car park, there's currently 100 car parks and by Christmas there'll be another 50. I thought I had referenced that, it was in my notes. So it would be good if we could just add that into them. So mover and seconder happy with that? Anything else? Any comments? No? Okay, so I'll put that then. All in favour of that, say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Shad.
Good, Anne. Just in relation to item 11.4, I'm on the New Zealand Conservation Authority and understand that as part of the process, an appointed commissioner from the Department of Conservation will be working with our staff through that process. So given my role, I won't participate in that, in the decision to be made on Puke Toromiro.
Thank you. Anything else? So that there's no recommendation. Oh, so I beg your pardon. That brings us to deputations, presentations and petitions, and we have Liz Gore. It is C. Sidera. Welcome, Liz. So you've got up to 5 minutes. Yep.
Hi. First, thank you all for seeing me. What I would like to quickly talk about is the car parking, the extended car parking of paid parking that you proposed. It got pushed out, started in November, pushed out to April, potentially pushed out to August, I think is now the new idea. When this came out, our street where we are down 3rd Avenue, the industrial side of 3rd Avenue was going to be affected, and the businesses all were very upset by this. So we decided to put out a petition on our counters because it affects basically the whole street and all the different businesses. Our street is made up of industrial businesses with the exception of Vetro basically, which is my business. We have mechanics, we have a healthcare centre, a heart centre, we have sign writers, engineering businesses, kitchen makers, tyre services, air conditioning companies, plumbers. These are your base workers. They are servicing the city and the inner city with what they do. Now, all of them without exception had issues with this because they feel it's going to drastically affect their business because basically of the staff issue. So there's two things that happen. When you've got a small industrial centre like this, the type of businesses that work there, they have very varied hours, but most of them are very early morning. So you get a lot of the staff coming in starting very early, and the public transport system that you are trying to encourage them to use and you want them to use does not serve the city. You have got a public transport system that serves for the 8 to 5 worker, not the 6 a.m. starter. So we've got two problems. The public transport system doesn't work and the paid parking is way too expensive for a normal worker, not a lawyer or a $100,000 a day worker earning that sort of money to pay. These people are earning $120 a day. They cannot pay to park. So I'll run through my staff because we've done a very good over the board, over the businesses check about this because yes, people would actually quite like to use public transport if they could. It's quite nice. You can sit on the bus and read your book and listen to your thing and come to work, no problem. But here's my case. Lisa lives in Welcome Bay. She starts at 6:30. There's no bus. Lisa, another one, Tapuna. She works 4 days a week. She starts at 10 a.m. The bus leaves at 7 a.m. It goes home at 5:10 or 5:15 from downtown. She can't take the bus. Ash lives in Mokoroa twice a week, no bus. Helen lives along Cambridge Road. She starts at 6:30 in the morning. There are no buses. Leslie lives along Cambridge Road. She starts at 8 twice a week. She would happily take it, but she picks up her elderly mother after work to take her shopping. It's the 2 days a week they do the mother's shopping. Nikki lives in Otamotai. She bikes. Quite happy to bike if the weather permits. She bikes. If the weather doesn't permit, there's no bus. She brings her car. Chris lives in Sulphur Point. She bikes. No problem, except we have to pick up pizzas every Friday. So she does that. So she brings her car to go and do the pizzas, which are out in Greerton. Andrew has another business. He visits his clients in their house. So he goes there before and after working for us. He uses his car to get to his clients, which are all around the city. Myself, I use one of our customer car parks. I come in by car every day. I do service runs. I do deliveries. I have to pick up the pizzas as well. And I also feel it's important that the owner has a car in there. If something happens to one of my staff, I can get them to emergency care. I've had to do that in the past. Other businesses, exactly the same problem. I've talked to them all. The healthcare worker, she starts at 6 a.m. There's no bus system. There's no public system that will get her to work at 6 a.m. And she was horrified by this, thinking, oh my God, how am I going to afford to come to work? I will not be able to afford to come in and pay to work. So here's the second issue, the cost of this. If it happens and if it's based on the car parking you have downtown now, we're talking probably about $25 a day for a worker to park. $2 for the first 2 hours and $5 every hour after that. If they come in for a 6-hour shift, an 8-hour shift, you're talking something like $29. These people are working at a $25 an hour sort of salary, $24.90, $25, if they're lucky, maybe $26. They cannot do it. They can't afford it. So let's look at this for a second. You've put in free bus parking for your workers. Our street is mostly used by TCC workers. This is a fact. When COVID was in, the street was empty. You guys are working from home. Our street was empty other than our early morning workers. COVID is not in. You are working. You have free buses. You use our street. The whole street at 7 o'clock is taken up with TCC workers, if it's not our early workers. That proves that the public system, even for your own workers who have free option, don't use it. So my thing is, if this is going to go ahead down the line, first, get the public system sorted. And it's not a TCC thing, it's a regional thing, but it's not on the public to do that. It's on you guys to work with the regional council to get a decent public system that attends people from 5 in the morning to 12 at night, because the bar workers trying to leave, your restaurant workers trying to leave downtown, they can't take a bus at 11 o'clock at night to get home. So that transport's got to be sorted out before you put in public parking all through the city, which is what you're trying to do. So first do that, then think about the price of that. If you're going to, if you can't get a good public system, we would ask that you talk to the businesses that are involved, that are going to be affected, and look at some sort of permit for businesses. Each business has 2 parks or whatever, some sort of sticker that says, my staff can park for a few hours here without being hit, because I can't subsidise my staff. I will lose all my staff. They come from all around the city and there's no transport. And I can't pay $25 a day for 3 staff members. And I can't expect them to do the same on their wages. So we're just asking that you don't go ahead with this now. And if you do down the line, think about how you're going to attend to the little guy, the worker, the guy who's serving your coffee, the lady who's doing your nails, because they're earning $25 an hour. They can't pay for parking. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for all that information. You'll be pleased to know that we agree with you that unfortunately, I think we were hopeful that the Regional Council would have their bus services running a lot more frequently and a lot more reliably by now. They're not. So the item on the agenda today is where we're going to take another look at this and have a good discussion about where we go in the future and how quickly we move, given what you're saying about the alternatives for people. So thank you very much for bringing that to us. We will get onto that item soon if you want to stay and listen to the conversation. Okay. Right. That brings us to item number 11, which is parking charges. And Nick, I presume you're going to talk to this?
Ko morena tātou.
Parking changes. I'm having trouble reading today.
Well, it could be parking charges or parking changes.
Both.
Changes to parking charges. Yeah, so this paper is about a proposed delay in the implementation of some of those initiatives that we're looking at for the city. So firstly, the extension of paid parking in the city centre, which we just heard Liz talk about. The Mount Manganui Parking Management Plan, on which we have done some consultation since the 13th of November. So we've collated a bit of feedback from that. And thirdly, the implementation of parking restrictions on Cameron Road when we implement the time-limited bus lanes, which were meant to be basically from practical completion. And we were planning to run them from late January. And in the light of the community sentiment, the sheer volume of work that's going on in the city, that's affecting businesses and the travelling public, the status of additional car parking, which we will have a fair bit come on stream early next year, and we can talk about that in some of the detail. And also point to the long-term benefits of what it is we're trying to do, because I think if there were better understanding of that transport for Tauranga actually does need to look quite different for the future, that we try to get the intent of what we're trying to do better understood by the community, notwithstanding the need for better services in the public transport space. So I think it's a combination of all of that. And also acknowledging, of course, that change is very difficult. But in light of all of that, we are suggesting that we delay the implementation of these initiatives and come back with a revised plan for that in March next year. So that's basically a summary of the paper. And Reese is here to answer any technical questions.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. I think it would be fair to say from the Commission, we're concerned at the huge amount of community concern about the parking plans, which I think we all entered into in good faith. But I don't think any of us really took into account the major disruption, particularly in the centre city, that Cameron Road would have. And if we go back to when we put the parking management plan into place, I think we were all still hopeful that Cameron Road was going to proceed on a block by block basis, which of course we know it didn't. And that might have brought a bit more order into some of the thinking that we had. I think there's also has to be a recognition that the regional council has not performed as quickly as we all anticipated. And in fact, my understanding is this hub and spoke, there's a business case going on to transform the hub and spoke process with a through process, but that's even been delayed until mid next year. And then the implementation of that will probably take another couple of years. So we just seem to be way out ahead of where, and we just heard, as Liz has said, for many of our workers who are trying to travel at different times or who have to travel at different times, there are no bus services. I mean, we fought hard through that joint public transport committee to get an 8 o'clock workers bus running during the time that the regional council struggled to get bus drivers. So we're way ahead of them, and that's just not fair on our workers and people coming into the centre city to start charging for spaces. And I think the other thing is that with the paid parking in the centre of town, we're not convinced, which is why we kept putting off, that we really can build a case for extending that paid parking when there's still so much available in the centre of town. So you normally put paid parking in when you're trying to manage and get turnover. Well, we've got good turnover in the centre of the city, so there's no need to try and extend that at this stage. I am going to suggest some changes to the recommendations. I'm disappointed in the report that it is reflecting that we were looking at paid parking at Mount Maunganui, because in fact the Commission was very clear on 2 occasions that we wanted the parking problems in Mount Maunganui defined first, because I certainly understood and have had many conversations with people from the Mount who were concerned that we were looking at that summer congestion and the lack of parking, particularly over the busy summer period, rather than looking to just put paid parking in straight away. So I think I remember talking with you, Reece, about talking to people, whether it was retailers, whether it was shoppers, people who are walking the Mount, people who live there, to try and identify what those problems were that we were going to be attempting to solve. And I think the survey that's just been done gives us some ideas, some suggestions that we don't put paid parking in the centre of the Mount, but we might want to enforce some of the restrictions that are there. So if I look at the key outcomes that we outlined in that parking strategy, I think they still are relevant, but particularly where we're enabling multimodal transport, a multimodal transport system, a key part of that is having reliable, consistent, available public transport, and we're a long way off that at the moment. In fact, I think last week, every time I travelled in the lift in our building, I talked to someone who had gone to wait for a bus, used the app, seen that the bus was 5 minutes away, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then no bus arrived, and it was an hour before the next bus. And that was a consistent story that I heard from potential bus users who then had to walk home and pick up the car and drive it in. And until we get past that, and then finally, I think the final frustration for us was the regional council turning down our suggestion of a park and ride in Tara Road. And they haven't turned it down completely, but it isn't a priority for them. So why should we make it a priority for workers in town to have to pay for parking when our transport partner isn't prepared to prioritise some alternatives at this stage? So I think what I would like to suggest, and I'm happy to move the recommendations A and B with a change to B2, that reflects more where we are, which is the development of Mount Maunganui Parking Management Plan. So we're deferring the development of a plan. And that C, which notes that staff will report back to council in March 2024 with recommendations on implementation of the parking strategy, also contains some triggers around public transport that can be used to then implement that parking management, that parking strategy, so that we're keeping the two in close cohesion. So I'm prepared to move that, if someone's prepared to second that. Shad, thank you. So B3 says development of a Mount Maunganui parking management plan, because we didn't have a plan. We were trying to identify the problem. And then C, an addition that contains triggers around public transport. Triggers around public transport to implement the strategies. Well, before implementing the strategy. Shared. So that's my contribution today.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I support your contribution and agree with the deferred approach and then also the recommendations. And agree with the, in terms of what we're trying to do and trying to achieve in parking around not just the city centre but across the whole city, and the outcomes we're trying to achieve. I mean, for me, they haven't changed. But I do want to pick up, I did dig out the parking strategy and have another look at it. And one of the things that kind of struck me was in section 7, it talks about parking management approaches, that it needs to be integrated, incremental and responsive. And I'm not sure we've necessarily aligned ourselves when it comes to being integrated. So integrated with particularly the public transport system, regional council. As Anne said, we seem to be a lot further ahead in terms of what we're trying to do across the whole city. And not necessarily joined up with the regional council. And that might be because of us, we're just wanting to hurry up and get on with things and see change and deliver change across the city. Incremental, there's a big work program along Cameron Road, urban transformation, trying to get, increased density over time. So whether that's in the CBD or in the Mount, and trying to get density, particularly along those corridors. That's going to take some time. We don't necessarily have that right now. So whether that's walking, public transport or cycling, there is an increase, but it's just going to take time for us to kind of get to that point where we've got density of people, but density of people using these facilities and services. And the last one was responsive. And part of this conversation is actually being responsive to the needs and hearing from the community about how the current system's working. And for a lot of our community, it's not. I use the buses most days. I caught the bus in today, use the app, picking up Anne's point. A couple of times, bus hasn't turned up, so I've had to go home, get the car, try and get into work on time. But for a lot of people, they don't necessarily have that opportunity to be able to catch public transport. For a lot of our office workers, we may have the opportunity if we live on a close to a public transport route, but a lot of people don't. And, trying to encourage people that do have that ability to catch public transport, I think, is important. And the stuff that we're doing internally with our staff, those that can, one person on a bus is one less car on the road. One person on a bike is one less car on the road, and provides those capacity on the network for people that need to use cars to be able to get around and do the things that they need to do. So yeah, I support the recommendations. And also the other thing is about information. So, great having the little boards up around town around parking provision and what's available. And I always see either Spring Street, but actually the 3 parking sites that we've got available, there's always capacity. What seems to be always capacity around the CBD. But for the Mount, it'd be useful for us to get good information about what's available, frequency, data, information about parking use to be able to help inform us make good decisions. And then also for the CBD, moving out through to 11th Ave, how's that space being utilised throughout the day? I'll leave it. I'm pretty sure my colleagues will have other comments to make as well.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly support the previous comments made, and just picking up that point that Liz made in terms of workers and bus services or lack of bus services at particular times. And if I haven't had so much comment in terms of the potential impact on terms of those going to businesses to purchase or whatever, but I've certainly had a lot of commentary around workers and particularly the need to actually use cars or whatever when those services aren't available. So really support us further thinking about that. And my couple of comments then is when staff come back in March, really keen for discussion around whatever is then recommended, how PT services may or may not support implementation at that point in time, because I think that's absolutely critical. And we don't want to be back in the situation where we are now, whether there is that disconnect that's been well enunciated by my colleagues in terms of putting in the parking strategy and restrictions, yet the alternatives are quite limited. My other comment in terms of the Mount Maunganui parking matter, and no issue with the deferral. However, there are existing time limits for parking in the Mount, and just want to be satisfied that those are being enforced in the same way that they are being enforced in the CBD and other parts of the city. Realising it's not paid parking, but there are time limits in a number of spaces, and it's really just understanding, not necessarily today, but at another time in terms of that consistent enforcement in the city. And Shad's just reminded me, and part of that is with that enforcement, getting that data, which feeds into our consideration of whatever we do in March 24.
Look, very hard to add to what's already been said. Totally agree with the comments of my colleagues. I mean, the reality is we are stuck between the rock and a hard place on this issue. As the city grows, there will be more and more pressure for worker parking as well as customer parking within the CBD. And getting the balance right between those two needs and the provision of public transport is vital. And so we need to work hand in glove, not only with the regional council to make sure that the public transport services meet demand, as Liz, I think, has very clearly highlighted today in her submission, but we also need to work in partnership with the businesses as to how they can adapt to the change. I saw this in Auckland as Auckland CBD grew with more and more people living there and more people working in the CBD. There simply was no longer capacity for everyone to be able to park outside the place where they work anymore. And there was the painful shift and transition that took actually many decades to public transport over time. And it does require very careful integration and management. It got to the stage as the city grew that paid parking expanded out into Parnell and Ponsonby and the wider a ring around Auckland City and more workers were being pushed out. Many of them adapted by parking further out and then catching a bus for the last leg. And so it's amazing how creative people can become to changing circumstances. And I think Tauranga is going through those growing pains as a city, just like Auckland did. And if there were to be an easy solution to this, I'm sure it would have been thought of before. The fact is that it's not easy. But the fundamental message I think that my colleagues have stressed around the need for very clear integration between the regional council and its public transport services, understanding and meeting the needs of the people, both customers of shops, but also workers of shops and businesses. That's the challenge in front of the staff. And clearly, in terms of the reports that come back in the new year, those are the wider issues that will have to be addressed. So I'm supportive of the motion, Chair.
I have one question, Reece, for you. Just, we've got a recommendation that we don't, so when Cameron Road's finished at the end of this year, when Cameron Road is stage 1's finished at the end of this year, the plan was to put in those time-limited bus lanes and so parking restricted at certain times. So we're going to defer that, but I'm not sure whether it's for Reece or Nick, but we do. So the Cameron Road project was a joint project between us, central government, and the regional council, and their requirements from the regional council. Are they at risk with this recommendation, or are the triggers that are in from regional council more around a dedicated bus lane? Because I know we've got to get to that within 10 years. I'm not quite sure whether it's 10 years of the completion or 10 years of the start, but we've got to get to a dedicated bus lane, but I'm not sure about the time limited ones.
Yeah, so that's the dedicated one is triggered by volume. This one is, we're not compromising any of those fundings or our arrangements with regional council. I have been in contact with the regional council about this delay, and although not happy with it, they accept that we will implement it at a later date. Yeah,
But that's good to hear.
and they are, of course, looking at it for us early as possible. And I can, we can all understand that as well, because that is one of those things that actually does make public transport a little bit more attractive. So, like you said, Stephen, it's a bit of a rock and a hard place here to find that right balance.
But the reality is that until Cameron Road is totally complete, they might get a faster way through part of it, but they've still got the rest to go. Okay, so I just think that's really important that those businesses along that road have a bit of breathing space before there's any more change, because they've been extremely patient during the 2 years of construction. Shad.
I think, looking back at the parking strategy, that the approach about being responsive, I mean, this is part of being responsive to the needs of our community, customers. But I think in the same ways in that integration, making sure that the regional council, we're being responsive together, I think.
Okay, all right. So you've got the amended recommendations, or the recommendations as have been moved up there on the screen. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Yes, I shared seconded it. Yep. No. No, but happy if you email it through to us. Yeah.
Now, when you say defer.
They'll bring, so the recommendation is that the council will bring a report, a revised report, or a report back in March on revising the parking strategy. Yep. That means we're not going ahead with any more changes until that report comes back, and we'll make a decision then. Okay. Not supposed to have conversations with the public during the meeting, but the chair did it, so we're okay. All right, I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Okay, the other one then and we've got Brian sitting there waiting, is the Golf Road Reserve. Thanks, Reese. Sorry, we give you a clip round the ears and then thank you, don't we? Well, not a physical clip round the ears, of course. Ross.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge Brian and the Manu community gardeners. Appreciate it's been a frustrating period of time. Appreciate their patience. The report I'll take largely as read. As you know, we've been working both with the community garden and with Monganui Golf Club to see if there's a workable solution, a Golf Road Reserve that would enable both the interests of the golf club and the community garden to be achieved. Despite some of the concerns that have been raised by the community garden, we believe that that is achieved by what's proposed, which would be essentially for council to lease an equivalent area of the golf club's land in exchange for their lease of the public reserve. I think it's important to note that outcome leads to no net loss of publicly accessible reserve space, which is important, particularly in terms of our obligations under the Reserves Act. The proposal essentially is to move forward with the next steps to try and enable both of those outcomes to be achieved.
Thanks, Ross. And I echo, as I said to Brian when he presented, the community garden people have been extremely patient as we've worked our way through this. I think we've got a sensible solution. Yes, I have actually been on the site, and I've played golf. I wouldn't say I wouldn't describe myself as a golfer, but I'm certainly not a golf course designer and don't intend to be, but I accept that there is a risk to human life and limb from that tee, and that the golf course are attempting to find the best way in their interest to resolve that. I also agree, even though if the community garden people don't want the area, but it is important that we maintain the area of public space. And so that swap of land is important. But I think the resolution then enables everyone to get on with this, and let's hope that it does enable us to get on with both the golf club's desires, but more importantly with allowing the community garden to go ahead, and that they will be good neighbours and look after one another, I think is intention. So I'm happy to move the recommendation. So I've been donkey deep in it, and would like to see it go ahead. Seconded by Bill. Any other discussion shared?
Thanks, Ross. I do note in the report it talks about spray drift and issues or potential issues from spray drift. Ultimately, the golf club will need to do ongoing maintenance from time to time, or even developing the green. The green. So, in terms of issues, are there issues with spray drift?
So, the garden's going to be located next to a golf course, so there's an innate element of risk there. We have asked the golf course for the list of chemicals that they use. They just sent that back to us on Friday afternoon. Haven't had a chance to interrogate that yet. The lease arrangement with the golf course, if that does go ahead post public notification, we would look to embed within that lease appropriate mitigations to minimise that risk to the community garden. That would be around things like timing, planting. When I say timing of sprays, if those are used, planting barriers and the like. And we would look to work with both parties to minimise any risk there.
So just to make it clear, so that Brian understands, and I'm sure he does, but to make it clear, past the resolution today, there's still a public process that we have to go through where we notify our intention to lease to both parties, pieces of land to both parties, and get public feedback on that before we can make the final decision. That will then come back to us. What's the timing of that, do you think, Ross?
Takes about a month to do the public
given
notification.
We're a month away from Christmas?
Yeah, I suspect the final resolution would need to be in the new year. The building on the Gulf Road Reserve is going to be demolished before Christmas, so the space will at least be cleared come the new year, and we can begin to work actively on the site with both parties to try and progress things as much as we can pending further resolution.
They probably missed the planting season this year for vegetables, but maybe get the winter planting underway. Okay, all right. Any further questions? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ross. Thanks for the staff who've worked on this for a long time, and Brian, fingers crossed, we're getting there. Item 11.3, consultation regarding Te Paho Reserve. Who's coming to, is that Simon? Who? Simon and Alicia and Carlo. Are you going to talk to us? Are you going to just take the paper as read?
I was going to take it.
You have, well, there's nothing more to add. I mean, actually, we heard it very eloquently in the public forum this morning. The significance of the site, the history of the site is in the documents in front of us. The importance of the access to the Urupā, and the site itself, and the aspirations of the hapu for the regeneration of the ecological values on the site. Are there any questions?
Just a comment, I suppose. I had some involvement when Waka Kotahi were doing the works at Maungatapu, and was always aware that there was a hapu aspiration for that land to be returned. So it was quite good digging into the report, but then also going back to the reserve management plan and seeing the commentary actually that the hapu had been before council on a number of occasions seeking the return of the land. So and a commitment by council to look at it. So using that as the basis, I mean, I'm quite happy to move the recommendation today for us to then move to the next step. You know, it's similar to a couple of other things we've done around the city, and recognising the issue or the loss of connection to particular spaces. And this is another opportunity for us to, I suppose, enable hapu, marae, whānau communities to be able to reconnect with these spaces. And so, yeah, I'm more than happy to support the recommendation. Probably just on another note, we did have a discussion at the Strategy, Finance and Risk about the review of this policy and how it's working. So how we've stepped through this, I think shows actually the policy is working. in terms of working through each step, engaging with hapu, with whānau. There are still a number of things we need to work through, but actually demonstrates that the policy does work. I know that when we first came in and we approved the policy, understand that council, this policy had been developed by the rangapu, by the collective over a long period of time. And it made sense to us to look at ways in which we could advance the aspirations for mana whenua, for tangata whenua, around reconnecting them to space, either to as a transfer, purchase, leases, all those kinds of things, and recognising their connections back to these spaces. So from my point of view, it does demonstrate that this does work, and understand that there are a number of councils that have, and through Carlo and his team, promoting these types of arrangements and these types of policies with councils. So, kind of leading the way, showing the way for a number of our other councils, particularly across the Western Bay and Bay. Yeah, those are my comments I wanted to make today.
Second, Chair.
Comments? So it's just to make it clear to people who might be listening that you're talking about the RFR policy, rights of first refusal policy. And that what we're doing today is, first of all, we're declaring that this piece of land is, we're classifying it as a strategic disposal, a strategic piece of land. Because we by disposing of it, we're trying to achieve some strategic objectives, and that is focused on the cultural objectives, and acknowledging that it's highly significant to the hapu, with historical, spiritual and ancestral values. So that's the first step in the process, and then we will have to go through a public consultation process then to notify that. But that means, because we've declared it as strategic, that it doesn't go to an open market for disposal. In other words, we're saying we want to achieve some very strategic things out of this. Because of that, it's identified as culturally significant. We're then proposing to hand it back to the original owners, without going through a sale process, essentially.
That's right. If I could just step in there too, the other difference is that with a strategic disposal, we don't need to necessarily seek through open market full value for the property, so we can take into account other matters. So it has that element to it as well in terms of the assessment here.
So it's a very deliberative process, and as you say, we're probably one of the few councils that have put that into place, and it's very helpful both to our community and also to council when they come to make these sorts of decisions, that there is a clear process in place.
I think also that some councils might not see this as strategic, as these are strategic outcomes, but for us, we're quite clear that it is.
Yeah, no, like it's a process. We think about it, and when you think about it and you listen to the history, and you understand there's an urapa in the middle of all that needs access to, and a long history associated with the site, then it's a logical decision, I think, to make, to declare it as being a strategic disposal. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Anything further? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. So just to make it clear, that starts a public consultation process. Will probably be the new year before that's signed off. And that will come back to us with the results of that consultation and the terms and conditions. Yeah. Thank you very much. Carlo.
Yeah, sorry for waiting to the end. I just thought I'd let you guys work through your process first, but do want to acknowledge it is a mature symbol that we're doing today in terms of the application of that policy. We have seen council apply the strategic acquisition and disposal aspect of it in favour of council's aspirations, and today I think we're recognising that on that piece of whenua, Actually, the community's achieved a lot out of it and had everything they've needed from it in terms of transport solutions. And we're right at the end of that process, and due to the humility and patience of the hapu, they've held fast to their aspiration, but worked with us to get to this point. So to have the council actually applying that strategic lens at this point, I think is a big deal in terms of relationships and how we work across our community. But I wanted it to note on the record, you know, it is great to see that the community gets the outcomes that they need as a wider community, but we also have that grace at the end of that process to be able to acknowledge the hapu and the patience and what they've gone through, especially being in an urupa as well there. I also want to acknowledge and bring to your attention, it's not lost on us that actually next week is the hura kohatu of Hui Kākahu. And, you know, he's been one of our leading kaumātua who stood alongside us. And I've told that story before, that when him and his wife got married many years ago, they were allocated a piece of land in this area. And 2 weeks later, the public works process was applied and the bulldozer went through. But despite that, I just want to acknowledge our Klaua for his grace and his patience, what we would call humari and whakiiti. He stood alongside us and guided council through that for many years, despite having that impact. And so I think it's not lost on us that we'll be returning part of that whenua around where he now lays, having passed away not too long ago. So I just want to acknowledge you, commissioners, for bringing us through to this point, and still some work to be done, and acknowledge our staff for their mahi, but also Anthony and Te Ata, and the wider Ngāti Ahi, Ngāti He, Ngāti Ruahine, all of the whānau that for many years have been working out what is the best and safe way and the safe pathway forward for us all. So e mihi ana ki a tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, Carlo. Okay, thank you very much. The next one is the approval to commence reclassification of the Whakitoromiru Pā to a historic reserve. And here we come. Emma, thank you.
Kia ora, I'm happy to take the report to read. I just want to introduce you to you, Diane Payton, who's our Natural Environment Advisor and has been working with the hapu in the Kopererua Valley since about 2015. So if there's any kind of operational questions, I can answer them for you.
Thank you. The only question I have really is, I just wonder whether we do need to, I mean, I know this is about a process, but all of it's quite symbolic. And I just wonder whether we do need to make reference to the management plan that's in place with the iwi somewhere, so that we don't lose sight of it. Do you think? I'm sorry, you're not, Shad's declared a conflict of interest, but I just wonder whether we need a D that just notes that there is an existing management plan in place. Yeah, we can do that.
We would support that recommendation.
Thank you. So is it got a name? Has it got a particular name?
The Whakitoromiru Pā Vegetation Management Plan, I think.
Heritage Management Plan.
Heritage.
Heritage Management Plan.
Heritage Management Plan. There you go. Thank you.
Right. We got that? Okay, so if we're just a D, that we just note that, and then it just stays all in the one place. You happy with that? Yep. Okay. Happy to move, Bill? Thank you. Yep, sure.
Just in terms of the change in classification, I'm assuming that planting, pest plant control, all of those things can carry on regardless of that change.
The plan has specific recommendations for all of those maintenance aspects, yes.
Second, thank you, Stephen. Any further discussion, questions? Straightforward, pretty sensible actions, and I think, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I just noticed in the report, like the
the whole valley is classified as an active recreation.
Recreation reserve.
Yeah,
yes.
active recreation reserve, and noted in the report, it talks about this relationship between heritage and active recreation and the misalignment, I suppose, between them. It just kind of was intriguing thinking about it as an active reserve when it's a wetland and being restored and I would have thought it would have been probably more appropriate to redefine it as some kind of environmental ecological reserve rather than an active reserve, and that would make sense when it comes to a heritage reserve. Anyway, it just intrigued me. It had a weird classification to it.
Let me just respond to that. So when we classify a reserve, it has to be based on the primary purpose and use of the reserve. And I think because that reserve is used primarily for recreation with the cycleway, walkway going through, that's where its classification has come from. And within that, we can recognise that there's some historic and ecological significance. In terms of the Tauranga Reserves Management Plan, we recognise the ecological value there. We've categorised it as an ecological and linkage reserve, partially for that reason. Yeah.
Just asking the Chief Executive, is it the Waitakere park we need to be careful because there's been a lot of discussion recently about is it the Waitakere Park in West Auckland that's actually been closed to the public, even though it's got walkways and cycleways through it for ecological reasons. So we can get all tangled up in how we describe them, but the important thing I think is that the whole thing is of historical significance, but it's also important for stormwater. So, that was our argument to the government over stormwater being part of the three waters going to a different entity from council, is that, who manages all of that when there are places like this that have a variety of uses, not underscoring their cultural historical significance. So let's not go down the Waitakere route where someone can close it close it off to the public. Anyway, okay, so it's been moved and seconded, and noting that Shad is abstaining on this. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. And again, so that's public consultation happens on that, and will come back to us in the new year. Review of enduring statements of expectations on the CCOs, and Anne is here on this.
Kia ora koutou. I'm conscious that we've had a fair run of CCO reports lately, so hopefully this is the last of many. But every 5 years we review our enduring statements of expectations with our CCOs, which outlines the governance principles. So we've undertaken that process now. Obviously, we have 2 new CCOs that we've added to the fold. So we've done a more generic ESC that will relate to all of them. And other than that, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
And you've just got some particular ones that you've highlighted for Bay venues, reflecting some of the changes that we're making to the financial strategy and relationship with council.
That's right. Yeah.
Making that clear, Bill?
And just in terms of, and I'm in paragraph 4 of the summary part, where it talks about creating a more high-level, generic, enduring statement of expectations. I just wanted some reassurance that on the way through to get the higher level, we haven't decreased meaningful expectations that are contained here.
I don't think that we have. And then the annual letter expectations that goes out to the CCOs, they're much more tailored to each CCO. So I don't think that we have, no.
Okay, no, thank you. And again, this may be dealt with in the annual letter or some other mechanism, but and I'm on page 86, it talks about the role of council and council's responsibilities. The enduring expectations outline expectations of the CCO, but there will be expectations that the CCOs have of the council. For example, small one, well, not necessarily small, no surprises, that collaborative approach. Where does that part of the equation get dealt with?
So I mean, the role of council and what's expected from the CCOs is kind of covered above in there. And then the no surprises policy is very much a two-way partnership, really, and that's outlined in the enduring statement of expectations. So the CCOs can also expect to learn and hear and be included in things as they progress before they come out to media or things like that. So that's very much part of this document.
Yeah, it's just having been satisfied that there's a two-way process.
Most
the traffic
definitely.
isn't all one way to
Yeah.
the CCO from
And the
council.
CCOs have been included in this review as well. We've copied them in and got their feedback along the way.
No,
Yeah, if you look at 7.2, I was heartened to see there that there is a council is required to involve those CCOs in the planning and policy development. So it appeared to me that it was sort of scattered through, that there were responsibilities on council back to that CCO family as well.
no, thank you.
Another one? Right, have you finished? Ah, okay. Anything else? So the recommendation is we receive it, approve the updated enduring statement of expectations and those changes to the funding principles for bay venues, which are right. Okay, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Temporary road closures for events. Is that you, Nick?
It's me. Thank you. And these are for the events that are planned, road closures for the events that are planned for this summer season. And we have had no. It was advertised on the 25th of October, and we haven't received any comments or objections to that plan as at 15th of November. So we're proceeding to go ahead with that.
It's a pretty substantial series of events for the city. The only comment I had, and it's one that's been put to me before from some of the businesses in the Mount, that we have a lot of events in the Mount, and they ask, because we close down both sides of the street for a whole period of time, and some of those businesses struggle. So to the events organisers, do we just, because I note in here, particularly the surf breaker triathlon, roads may open earlier depending on the progress of the event. So do we actively manage that? Can we just make sure that we do to give those businesses a bit of relief, because they do find themselves closed a lot.
Yeah. We can actively.
People can't get access to them. Yeah. Shad.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, just to follow on from that, I'm aware that Moral Trust is also at our last Potireo meeting indicated, there's a lot of activities and events and things, particularly on Moral as well, and they've got concerns about the types of activities, but also the size and significance of activities and the pressure on Moral itself. And Matimona did make the suggestion that we should be trying to, I'm not saying some of these events, like the active events, but some of the other events that might use Moral was to try and encourage them to use other parks and reserves across the city, like Papamore Hills or the other sub-regional parks. But my question was, or comment was in relation to the events that are currently in the plan. Would be useful to get information and, again, data about how people are using parking, access, all those kinds of things to help inform decisions in the future about how, do we continue with running these large scale events, or do we limit the number of these large scale events? So it'd be good to have information to help inform future decisions around, so whether it's triathlons, half marathons and those kinds of things. Because there's huge demand to use because it's a beautiful spot. And the impacts on communities. So it would be useful for us to understand, the size and scale use of our facilities and services to be able to inform kind of future decision making.
I was just going to say, is someone move? Bill and Stephen? Thank you. Yeah, when you look at it, there's some huge impositions on some parts of our community. I mean, there's always an economic benefit, and a lot more of these events are doing the work afterwards to identify the economic benefit. But we did have someone come to us in the clinic that every time there's something on at the Domain, their business, access to their business is closed because they're right on that road that borders the Domain. They were considering buying the section, I think, from memory, and we said there's probably going to be a lot more events on the Domain. It might not be necessarily a good idea. Yep.
Comment, Chair, and I presume it's the responsibility of the event organiser, but making sure they're not giving, particularly in respect of the mount, that the mount's not closed, because I can't remember the event a few weeks ago. And when you're driving along either Tauranga or Hewlett's and then heading through Girvan to Ocean Beach, you just need to organisers that you can actually still park or get to where you're going, often quite close to the area that's closed. So it's just how some of that communication occurs.
All right, there's a lot in there.
Yeah, I've got a few actions here to take away, so happy to follow up on that. It will make good sense, so thank you.
Okay, nothing more? All right, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carry. It's going to be a busy summer. And good to see a lot happening around our centre city. Okay, this is long awaited. Paul, this is great. Ratepayer Assistance Scheme.
Yes, as you rightly point out, it's been around for a little while. It's been worked on by a number of councils, including Tauranga. A few weeks ago, Auckland passed a similar resolution to progress this further. It does require some legislative change, which we will look to assist with. We also are looking, and we would hope that if this is supported, that other councils will also provide that support to actually take it to the next step. We believe if we can get that legislative change to occur, that it can be implemented relatively quickly. To explain what it is, it's three fundamental parts to its rates postponement, deferred development contributions and property improvement loans are the three elements. We think it fits very nicely with conversations going forward around value capture and the like in terms of providing alternatives for ratepayers where they might need to. So this is to really take it to the next level, and it's modelled on the local government funding agents are involved as well, so that they are supportive of the scheme. Take questions.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you. You've plugged away at this for quite some time. Probably getting Auckland on board has been the impetus given. And it's something, of course, we'll raise with the new Minister for Local Government, who's also the Minister for Auckland, which will help. My question was really about so I think we all understand the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, which is about we've had representations from ratepayers here about being able to defer their rates with a charge against their property, and for individual councils to try and do that, it's just too expensive and it's administratively it's huge. So the benefit of having a local government scheme, a national scheme is enormous. Deferment of development contributions. Is there is it likely to swamp the scheme, or is it being seen more as something that's able to sit alongside IFF for helping off-balance development costs?
That's correct, certainly the latter. It's the scheme benefits by scale as well. So in terms of borrowing volumes and the like, that one in particular does need to be worked very closely as how it actually integrates with IFF as well, because there can be some crossover in the sense that it is providing a regularly paid stream effectively similar to what IFF does. So that is one of the pieces that does need to be improved or worked out how it does actually fit together with that. And we're looking at potentially some changes through to IFF as well to make these tools all integrate together as a piece of work that needs to happen.
Because you could see the development contribution coming from the developers as well, rather than just the ratepayers. It could be the developers who are paying a consistent amount of money through, which could give you two streams, and one from the developers and one from the ratepayers, which might actually make some of these developments feasible to put the infrastructure in. Yeah. No, very exciting. Bill.
I share your excitement, Chair. I'm really delighted in terms of some tangible progress in terms of it moves along. Paul, I was just interested in particular, really a clarification on paragraph 15. It talks about the local authorities would include another acronym, Chair, RAS, levy on their rates invoices. So that would be separately identified as the contribution that we make to the scheme for what, residential ratepayers or across the whole spectrum of ratepayers?
If I understand your question correctly, the idea is that, for example, in a rates postponement, the rate would be recognised, but it would be effectively transferred to the new entity for the payment of that rate until such time as the property was disposed of or
sold.
That's right. So it would effectively still show as a legal rate through the rates invoice, but the payment it would be shown. We've got to work through the detail more, but it would be shown effectively as a payment out of and wouldn't be a current and liable payment of that ratepayer at that point in time. Yeah.
It's quite transparent.
Yeah. Anything else? You happy to move? Yeah, it would be good. Thanks, Bill. Stephen, second. Yeah. I wish I'd known earlier when I was talking to Wayne Brown. I didn't realise we had it was a significant thing in common, as I was struggling to find others. No, really good work. Thank you. I'll put that then. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So to be clear, that's approving that, but there was still a long way to go before this would actually come into being. Okay. Transport system governance update and PEI.
Thank you. Yes, so this paper is an update following a meeting on the 11th of September, where Commissioners asked for us to engage with Waka Kotahi to develop an appropriate and integrated governance and delivery structure for the transport system. That is not completed yet, so this is an update, and by the 11th of December we will have that structure completed. So this is a sort of a snapshot of where we are at this point in time, and to report back on the delivery structure for the TSP program, and also to report back detailing the composition and governance of the management structure for the PEI project specifically. So that's what's included in the report. I also wanted to point out that the way we have been working with Waka Kotahi on this is also in response to the Darlow Tucker report on Cameron Road Stage 1, which had a suite of recommendations for decision-making improvement and improved management of projects. And as you know, we've had a specific review on the Tauranga West enabling works, which has been here, and also this over the last couple of weeks we've done the same for the PEI. So the recommendations of that report are in here, which we think are relatively straightforward to respond to. And when we got that response from the reviewers, they said to us that this is one of the better prepared contracts for major projects in the region, the PI that is. So I think we're in a pretty good space in terms of de-risking it for delivery. And I've got Chris Barton here to respond to questions or add any context, Chris.
Thanks, Nick. Look, I think this is a hugely significant paper for the Commission and for the Council as a whole. I think we're all a bit scarred by the Cameron Road Stage 1, it would be fair to say, and our community is also. And so it's good, I think it's right that we share that review that you've had done on Cameron Road Stage 1. As we prepare for the delivery of 5 major projects over the next 5, 6, 7 years, and learn from that. And I think it's right that we acknowledge that Cameron Road Stage 1, we didn't get it right, and that we've caused, and by not getting it right, that has caused huge disruption and distress to many of our business owners along the corridor, to homeowners trying to get to and from their homes, and to commuters who are just trying to get down Cameron Road or through Cameron Road to get to where they live and where they work, and for many people to get to sports and supermarkets and schools, etc. And we've got to learn from that experience, and I think that was an excellent review that was done. One of 2, I think we did the JV when we called them in, the board of the joint venture. They had done a review as well, and made a number of changes, and the most significant being that we didn't open up great areas of the road and leave them when we found that the services weren't in the places that we thought they were going to be. And it was amazing that at that stage, 18 months in, we found that it was actually cheaper to cover that up and go away and get it redesigned. So it was interesting to see that point picked up quite significantly in the second review, which is part of this paper, that we need to do much more intensive investigation of the sites before we actually start construction. So we've got a much better picture of where services are. There'll always be surprises because civil works, as Nick says, never go smoothly. But learning from that we're better to cover them up and go away and incentivise redesign and come back to it later, rather than continue as we did down the road, opening up more and more sites while leaving many still closed off with nothing happening. And I think that was the biggest complaint that I had from people along that road. They were happy to put up with they're content to put up with a bit of disruption, but when that disruption saw no action for, in some cases, months, then they couldn't understand why they were made to suffer in that way. So as we look forward with those 5 major projects, we know that we need to have that experience of those large-scale projects. And as a result of the discussions that we had around that review with the Cameron Road stage one. I've talked to quite a few others, talking about what does that experience mean when you're overseeing a large project, and it means a lot. That means you can anticipate when things are not quite right because you've had the experience of them going wrong, and there's always going to be some surprises. You've got better tools with which to address those issues, and you're able to understand the consequences of those surprises much, much more. So it is critical for us that we get that expertise overseeing those projects, and then we're not relying on staff who haven't had that experience to try and cope with all of that, and that's not fair either, expecting them to be able to do that. So I think the direction that we're going is critical. We envisage this with the delivery of Te Manawa o Te Papa by creating a CCO and putting people on the board of that, overseeing that delivery of that project, who have had similar experience. So it makes absolute logical sense that we would do the same for these major transport projects, which add up to, what is it, $1.2, $1.5 billion, and are of critical importance to the city of Tauranga. The only suggestion I would make is connecting Mount Maunganui is a big project, actually means a lot to a lot of people in the city who have no idea what that means. It's actually Hewlett's Hull Tortora, just because Waka Kotahi gave it that crazy name. We should be describing things as they are, and in brackets I'd like to see Hewlett's Hull Tortora, which is of huge significance to anyone who's trying to get around Tauranga at any stage. The rest of them are very descriptive, but those are 5 significant projects for the future of Tauranga over the next 10 years, and we have to deliver them well. Each one of them in their own sense will cause enormous disruption to the city, and the conversations we're having with Waka Kotahi as recently as last week when the board were here was, how do we work together to manage this? Because every one of these has a long-term effect on our city, on the people who live here and work here and try to move around, as we've seen over the last, I don't know, it feels like 20 years with the B2B, but I'm sure it's only something like 7 or 8. But the agonies that people like Lynx Ave have gone through, where a residential street that should only have 2,500 suddenly gets 9,000 vehicles travelling up and down it every day. So the effects of these is going to be enormous, and we need to make sure we're working closely with Waka Kotahi, and we've got experience overseeing the projects to make sure that we do it efficiently and effectively with as minimal disruption as we can possibly do. So I thank you for the papers, and I think it's probably one of the biggest papers that we've had in front of us for an impact on the city, for potential impact on the city over the next 10 years. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and totally agree with your comments. Just a couple of observations. I'm fully supportive of the recommendations here, and I think having that depth of experience and oversight of major projects is fundamental to success. To be effective, given the layers that are set out of the various layers of governance, clarity of roles at each one of those layers and reporting lines and accountability is really critical. Otherwise, you can end up with a lot of actors all kind of running around thinking they're doing the right thing, but there is a lack of clarity. So I would stress that. And then the other observation, I felt that was a bit of a missing piece from a user perspective, particularly in the council program governance group. Responsibilities refer to paying particular attention to the objectives of the program, and obviously that's key: funding, consenting, program, risk, delivery models, all of which are important. Stakeholders And stakeholders could be defined as users of say, a transport corridor, but I just think it would be helpful to be explicit about that, because you've got both those who are driving or taking public transport or walking and cycling through a corridor, as well as the shopkeepers and the businesses, and which I would sort of define as perhaps the wider stakeholder group, and we've got to balance the needs of both. And I think the critical function of this group is to make sure that the vision of the project is held right the way through the project, but also in its delivery that the needs of both users and stakeholders are being satisfied as the project is being implemented. And I think that was the key missing piece in Cameron Road. In particular, what tends to happen, my experience with these projects, is the contract managers and program managers are all head down, bottom up, because they've got deadlines, commitments, budgets, huge expectations on them. And because of those very strong drivers, the oversight of how this is impacting the community can get lost. And I think that is the fundamental piece that particularly the program governance group is standing back from a higher level and saying, are we delivering the outcomes, not only in the long term from the project, but in terms of how we're delivering in the short term? So I'm keen to see that aspect of strengthened.
Yeah, I can respond to that, and I think you'll be pleased to hear that we, together with Waka Kotahi, we put together a skills matrix that we will need for the governance board. So making sure that between the people that we do put up for this, we go through a selection process, but also in that selection process have all the criteria identified for successful delivery of the program. And the point that you're making around stakeholder and impact is as one of those criteria in the selection process as well. So I'm sure we'll get that well covered.
So that's to receive the report, and then focusing on Papamoa East interchange, there's a series of requirements of the chief executive around that oversight of the contract. But the report is actually going further than that. Because this is an update on the PEI, but the report is signalling that across those 5 major projects, we're going to have this expertise, oversight, and a similar identified governance structure.
That's right, and that will be reported back in its entirety on the 11th of December.
11th of December, yeah. So this is, and we didn't, sorry, have we got someone to second it? Yeah, Shad. We didn't go through the report. I mean, I think it's fair to say that everyone struggled and did their best to deliver Cameron Road Stage 1. And again, it started before the commission came, but it was 46 million of government funding, shovel ready. Apparently we were one of the most shovel ready. And we had to start the contract before the design was finished, which was one of the points picked up in the report, which was none of our doing. And the government required us to get started by a certain time. And that's one of the dangers of chasing government money. It often comes with a whole lot of tags that can, it wasn't just a transport program, it was an urban transformation program that replaced 100-year-old pipes, prepared for intensification, and then provided for multimodal transport. So it was a lot more complicated than perhaps had been originally identified, which means just goes to show you need to spend a lot of time at the beginning before you start these projects and be very clear about what the vision is and what you're trying to achieve, and then who's going to be held responsible for which bits of delivery, which is your point. Okay, so moved and seconded. Any other comments? We look forward to that report on December the 11th, which will set out then the governance structures for the 5 big projects. I'll put that, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much. We probably need to get the, see we've got Leon here. Annual report, do we want to do that? Yep, well come on up, come on up.
We're very pleased to have the 2023 annual report here for adoption. You've seen this a couple of times at Strategy, Finance and Risk Committees. We've worked through the questions, comments and changes that you've provided to us. Auditor here to provide their opinion shortly. First of all, I'd just like to thank Maren and the finance team for getting us across the line on the numbers, and Catherine and her team on all the front sections, as well as the audit team and the relationship that we've developed with Leon and co. Also acknowledging the business who we've had to drag back into thinking about 2023 several times when they're moving forward with the next 10 years. So like I say, this is the final report for adoption today. We are here to answer any questions that you've got before we bring Leon and Victor up.
Any questions? Yep, Bill.
I don't have any particular questions, Chair, given we've seen this a few times, but I'd just like to make 2 or 3 comments. And I know it's not bedtime reading, but I have to say, looking at the annual report, a lot has occurred today, and there is a hang of a lot of stuff underway. And that is also supported. There are some great stories in here as you're working through it. So there is a lot of information that actually outline clearly what's happening in the city to date, but also the what's underway and will be completed at a later date. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I know it's sad, but I looked at the 2019 annual report online last night, and it was interesting in going through it. It was only just the front section in terms of the highlights. And there were 13 highlights or projects outlined in the 2019. Interestingly, 4 were capital, 6 were planning and reviews, and there were 3 others. For this annual report, there are 32. I haven't gone through all the analysis of the breakdown, but I think it just highlights the breadth of activity, the breadth of investment. And as part of that investment in the 2019, there were no transport projects from memory, whereas now I think there are 7 or 8 that are clearly outlined in this one. So I really just wanted to note that and the progress, in my view, that is occurring since that 2019. I didn't look at the COVID ones because that would have probably skewed the what occurred at that point in time. And also within that period of time, we've had another close to 30,000 people arrive in that 5 or 6 year period. So given all of that's happening, but together with the range of work that's undertaken, I think it's fair to acknowledge that, and as part of that also acknowledging the community, because they've actually funding in terms of since that period of time, but also noting the work of our staff and others involved in that delivery. So thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Bill. I too wanted to congratulate the staff. I mean, I think the document itself reflects the way that the organisation has grown over the last 18 months, and congratulate particularly the executive members sitting around here who've overseen that as the Commission has taken the reins and lifted the performance of the organisation. And I think this annual report reflects the big change. It's good that Bill went back and looked at 2019, although I question whether he wouldn't have been better to go for a walk along Mount Maunganui Beach. But however, the contrast is quite remarkable, and that's why the Commission is here, because that wasn't happening. I think where we've got to with the presentation of this is a document that, although it isn't bedtime reading, but there are some, you've depicted some of the activities and some of the expenditure and focus in a way that is easily understood. As you flick through some of the pages, you can get a pretty quick picture of what's actually happening in council. So I congratulate you on that. You've been very patient as we've suggested different changes and bits and pieces. But we've ended up with a document that I think accurately reflects quite a different organisation from the one of 2019, and that's appropriate because it is a different organisation and the city's in a far different place. I've just had an email this morning from someone who is advocating for us to delay our long-term plan. So it was good to reference on page 70 that the reason that the Commission's term was extended included the terms in the terms of reference of our extension was to deliver the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan. So we have no mandate to do anything other than that. And I know that's dragging us out of 2023, but it's here in the document, the terms of reference for the Commission. And we all acknowledge that this isn't the normal way that councils are managed with a Commission sitting in place, but we have specific terms of reference and we work to those until that mandate is changed. And it's good to have those terms of reference outlined in the document. So congratulations on getting this. Also congratulations on the relationship with audit, because that has enabled us to work together with audit to deliver the documentation for that long-term plan and the documentation for our annual report in as timely a manner as everyone's been able to accomplish. And without that relationship, which is a two-way relationship, and I'll acknowledge it when Leon comes, we wouldn't have been able to do that. But enormous amount of work from staff, really appreciate it, and thank you very much. So it's been moved. Yes, you move A. Thank you. And Stephen second. Any further comments? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So you step to one side and we'll get audit up. Thank you. And we've got tabled the report from audit. Good morning.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've completed the audit, and I'm not too loud, am I? Because my wife says I am.
Yeah,
yes.
My husband says the same, but you know.
So yeah, we've completed the audit and ready to issue the audit report. The one you've got in your hands is very close to the final. I got at 10 o'clock this morning, or just before 10, last iterations from the OAG. Its wording changes. It's not going to change. It's still an unqualified opinion, still have the emphasis of matter, referring to the Three Waters reform and the change in government. And yeah, I have to agree, this was an interesting process, doing an LTP so early, and then at the same time to try, not trying, we got it there, doing the annual report audit. And you're quite right about the relationship. I think you've got a really good team.
Oh, thank you, Leon, and as I say, thank you for your part in that relationship, because it is two-way, and we know you've gone out of your way to ensure that we could do this. It is really interesting, the three waters, isn't it? And reading through the details of the coalition agreements, they're still talking off balance.
Yeah, I probably am not close enough to Wellington or the three leaders to comment on that, but yeah, it is still what is going to happen. I noticed in the agreement they talk about repealing it immediately, but then what next?
Yeah.
You're quite
But
right.
still referring to alternatives that could include off balance arrangements. So that it's still it's still very murky waters.
Oh, it is, yeah.
But as we've discussed, and I think from one of the commissioners this morning, the history of Tauranga is that you don't do something today because something might happen tomorrow that changes that. Whereas we have to get on, because there's a whole lot of other stuff that needs to happen in the city, needs to be planned for, and we can deal with changes if and when they arise, and it becomes clear exactly what those changes are. So thank you for your guidance, thank you for your help, and just a few wording changes, and we're from the OAG, and then we're there.
We're good to go.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Leon? All right. Happy to move that we receive the Audit New Zealand report. We would then adopt the TCC annual report, authorise Chief Executive to make any necessary minor changes, which might include any wording that needs to be altered to fit the OAG, publish it, and then just note the delay, which was by agreement, really. By agreement.
Yeah, it was mutual agreement that.
Yep.
We won't refer to that in our audit report. I think in the one you've got, it is still, we refer to it.
Oh, okay.
But that was one of the changes that came out.
Right, because it was agreed. Okay. Yep. Excellent. So you're moving that bill and Stephen seconding. Thank you very much. Any further comments? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, and thanks, and have a very, very Merry Christmas. We'll see you in the new year.
Will do. Thanks.
Okay, so that brings us then to the end of the public meeting. So what we might do is go into public excluded and take a 5-minute break. Bill's moving, Shad's